Hello, I am Kevin Anderson,
And I'm Adam Okada.
and we are clinical educators and hosts of the Ask the Educator podcast, brought to you by Healthmark, a Getting a company.
Are you a sterile processing technician, infection preventionist, or biomedical engineer? No matter your role, if you're involved in medical device processing, this podcast is for you. Our goal is to equip you with the knowledge and tools for excellence in medical device processing.
Now let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ask the Educator podcast. This is Kevin Anderson, your host, and with me, as usual, I have Adam Okada. This one is going to be a little bit different in a sense that we're going to kind of just discuss between the two of us a topic that Adam had shared during a former CS week, 7 days of CEs, and it has to do all about with technicians, why they're thought of as entry level. Is there maybe some room to possibly evolve a little bit and change even the title, maybe from a technician to a technologist and that sort of thing, and maybe why there might be advantages and that sort of thing. So without further ado, Adam, why don't you just kind of cue it up? Like, where did you kind of come up with this idea, or what prompted you to think about this in this way? I thought it was an interesting thing when you proposed this topic as an idea.
Yeah, so it came from a conversation I had while I was doing one of Healthmark's comprehensive practice, consultative practice reviews, or CPRs. And I was at a facility and I was watching a technician, and he was not performing insulation testing as he was putting together a set. And as I got him to open up a little bit, I started asking questions about why he was not testing. He was a traveler. And basically what he told me was he'd never had his contract renewed or anything because he was doing things well. He got his contract renewed because he was very productive. So the faster he put trays out, the more he got his contract renewed. So he learned over time. He had been a traveler for like 10 years. So he knew he was supposed to. But as a worker, he was like, my employment depends on me going fast. And if I go fast, they like me. And if I go slow, they don't. So he was skipping those steps. So we talked to the manager, and I wasn't trying to throw him under the bus or anything. I just wanted to know, like, what did the job description say? And he was right. The technician was right. It was not in his job description to test any instruments. It had a lot of like the HR legalese, like you have to be able to lift 25 pounds. You should be all the technical aspects of the position. But when it came to the sterile processing specific parts, it had one sentence that said, the job responsibilities are to clean and sterilize surgical instrumentation. And that was his job description. That was the only sterile processing specific part of that. So that's where the idea came from, is like, that's kind of what they used to think sterile processing was. It was just, you clean it and you throw it in a sterilizer. That's where flash sterilization came from, was it's so easy. Just clean it and pop it in the sterilizer. But over time, we really, like you said, evolved past the point of just spraying things down and sticking it in a sterilizer. There's so much complex science, technology oversight, regulatory oversight. I mean, surveyors really focus in on sterile processing. So maybe this idea of what an entry-level position is no longer relevant.
No, that's a great story, and I can see where you were coming from. Where with that specific contract employee, that's interesting that he was sort of incentivized to just kind of basically clean and sterilize at the fastest rate possible. Basically, is how he kept getting contracts. And to your point too about how things used to be. I remember when I first started in the operating room, and for the eye rooms, we had our own sterilizer, and I'll tell you what, there wasn't really much of a decontam. All right, so it was like rinse these instruments off and put them in the autoclave, and basically we're flashing 5 sets of eye instruments all day long for really busy ophthalmologists. And thank God, looking back, like, that it's not like that anymore. But times have changed, and they should change. I mean, the instruments have changed. They're a little more complex, and they continue to get more complex. The procedures themselves that are being performed are more complex. And even like the things that we learn, like we've learned a lot through ST-108 and the impacts of water quality on both sterilization and the cleaning process. I've gotten some, maybe not every listener out there realizes this, but I have posted it here and there out there on social media about, maybe that this position of sterile processing technician should be a degree program or something like that, just as food for thought. All right. I'm not saying that, yes, it needs to be a black and white type of thing. I'm just saying food for thought. And that's where I thought, like, this was really interesting that you brought up sort of even the technician versus the technologist. And, maybe there's a difference there worth kind of looking into. And, you had brought that up to me prior to this recording. So I was wondering what you found in sort of your, digging, what the difference is between these two things, and why maybe there is a room for change here.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, the if you look at the definition, so when I had that conversation with that technician, um, it got me thinking, and it got me thinking about if that's the job description, that needs to be updated because again, you should have testing of instrumentation, you should have, able to test sterilizers, read biologicals, all the science that goes into what we do. And that got me thinking about entry level positions because
Mm.
the hospital system is incentivized. They like paying us very little. So they want to keep us as entry level positions. But is it anymore? Like, is it really? There is so much that goes behind it. Like you said, like bringing up the idea of a degree program, I definitely think there should be, at least for sterile processing leaders. I mean, water quality is a semester long course, at least, right? Water quality impacts every area of our departments. So I mean, going back to the definitions, when I was doing that presentation and researching it, I looked up the definition of a technician, which is essentially a technician runs the machines that run the department, essentially. I don't have the actual definition up
Sure.
right in front of me, but it's something about, essentially starting machines or able to run a machine. That's what a technician does, is run the tech. A technologist is somebody who uses science and technology to solve practical problems. And that's what a sterile processing person does. And that's why I think they shouldn't be a technician anymore. It should be a technologist. Other departments that have that title are like the laboratory. Surgical technologists also have that title because they use science to solve the problems in their departments, just like we do in SPD.
Yeah, those are very good points, and I feel like you're definitely onto something there. And I think, one of the biggest complaints in the industry, and I don't want to make this about wages. It is a very real issue for people, and I totally understand it, and I'm behind them on that. They definitely don't get paid enough. But to your point, the hospital sees this position as entry level, as equal to environmental services or food services or any of the like. And not to diminish anything that any of those folks do. Everybody is so important and critical to the healthcare system, no matter what your role is. But there is more science. There is more behind the why, what we do, and understanding why we're doing it, so that we don't, misincentivize and tell people that all we want is speed out of you. All right. I mean, we're literally paying this person more to do more work, but less quality, which is not good in this day and age. And, one of the things that I thought could maybe get us there is a degree program. And then maybe with that, there is a change in title. And then, HR departments in sterile or in the hospital, maybe they look at you different. Maybe, okay, now you need more than a GED, you need this degree or whatever, this program, that changes things a little bit. I think the certifications are great, but it's interesting, when kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but we have 4 certifications. Like, very cool, but isn't that kind of an indicator that, like, maybe there's so much there that this could really maybe possibly be a degree program? Like, there's not 4 different OR certifications for an OR nurse or certified surgical technologist, there's one, right? I love the system we have, but maybe it is time to evolve. It's just, again, it's something to think about. But I like the idea of, you know, thinking about that technician versus technologist and the difference. I was looking it up just before we had this conversation here, and you're right. It was basically the same. I found the same thing. It's like the technologist usually has a deeper understanding of the science behind what all the techs are doing, and they usually have more education as well, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's the main point that I'm trying to make is when we start a person in sterile processing, typically what we do is we sort of drop them in SPD. We have them shadow more experienced tech that will then show them the things they have to do, and then they're on their own because they've been shown how to do it and signed off that they know how. But they don't understand the why behind everything that they're doing. And that's where we see the errors. That's where we see mistakes. That's where we see people that are well intentioned and I'm sure want to do a good job, but just don't know why it's important to do a specific step. Like if that technician understood how many people had died from bad insulation, poor insulation, I doubt that he would be making that choice. But he did it because he was wanting to keep his job. And I understand the impulse. But if we don't train the why first, right, and have some form of training, at least like a certification program before they set foot in sterile processing, where then they get that background of why, and then they go into the department, I think we're going to continue to see just a lot of, well-intentioned errors, I guess I would say. And that's really the purpose of it, is maybe we elevate our profession by giving us the job title that we deserve, because the technician job title, it's good for a warehouse. And there's nothing against warehouse work, right? There's nothing against people that are working in the cafeteria, but
sure.
that's really what they're doing is they're running machines. They're trained on how to use them and then they run the machines. But the why behind, say cleaning verification testing, why do you do that? How do you interpret test results? Why do you test your automated washer? Why are you doing a cavitation test on your ultrasonic? All those things are science and technology things that you have to have a basis and understanding in science and technology to then be able to interpret those results. And until we get that why first, we're going to continue to see just problems in sterile processing, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up a point about maybe having the certification if we keep the current model the way it is, but having it as a requirement to have certification um, before they start their employment. That's an interesting proposition, and it does make me wonder if that would be enough to make it be considered higher than entry level, at least in the eyes of a healthcare system's HR, right? And if that's the case, then maybe it would be something that simple as changing the job description, the job name, and then requiring that certification. And then maybe, you see like programs like the Purdue University CRCST prep course, where it's really taking you through the book, but it's on you to get your clinical side of things. Maybe that would be a good way to kind of segue from entry level to, maybe perhaps down the road sometime, maybe an associate degree type level. But one thing I think that's really important too in these discussions is to kind of be sensitive to the to the how this kind of stuff makes people feel. And I feel like I definitely don't want people out there right now that are literally working in sterile processing departments to be like, whoa, what, are you trying to say I'm not qualified? You know what I mean? Like to do the job I'm doing. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm trying to give you credit for what you're doing. And I'm trying to give you the recognition for how difficult the job is. And you know, uh, I don't know, give it the credit that it's due. You know what I mean? And both from a title standpoint, from a pay standpoint, and from the eyes of it's kind of an invisible hierarchy that you see in the healthcare system, but it is there nonetheless. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be like that. I feel like we are more like peers of those who work in the operating room and should be seen as such. So anyway, that was kind of like a really cool idea that I thought that you had in terms of looking at it from the title perspective. But what do you think? I mean, what do you think as far as um, how we can facilitate that new name or image for sterile processing? I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but I mean, practically speaking, how do we do like take action here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I echo your sentiment. I mean, the people working in sterile processing, it is a physically demanding job. I mean, you're lifting heavy trays, pushing heavy carts. It's physically hard and you're tired at the end of the day. It's mentally difficult because you've got tens of thousands of instruments, all with unique IFUs, right? And those IFUs have subsections, decontamination, point of use treatment, automated cleaning, testing, all that kind of stuff. So you have to mentally remember just an insane amount of information. Some of these IFUs, by the way, I looked at the duodenoscope IFU. It's like 330 pages long for a duodenoscope IFU. So I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of mental energy that it takes, and there's the emotional toll that a sterile processing person has to go through because you're dealing with instruments that are going to be used on patients. So you want to do a good job, and if you make a mistake, that's hard. That's why you see emotions run high, and why you see sometimes OR gets upset, SPD gets upset, they fight with each other, just because it is an emotionally taxing position. So sterile processing is unique in that way that it has those three aspects. Not a lot of other jobs have all three of those things. So I think the thing that we do to change the mindset around sterile processing as an entry level position is we first focus on the job description. The job description and the job title would be the first things I would look at as a leader to possibly change and update and say, you need to have an understanding of all of these kind of scientific concepts to be able to work in a sterile processing environment. And if you're going to have an entry level position where somebody's going to come in without any training or knowledge, you got to give them some type of baseline education before they're working on instruments for patients, because it's so hard to pick up all of these things. I know that there was like a light bulb for me about 6 months in where I finally was like, okay, I think I get this job now. But before that, I was just trying to stay above water. Like, it was very, very difficult. From there, from the job title thing, then I think we as an industry need to discuss. I mean, first of all, I think calling it sterile processing technologist is a more appropriate title. It gives it a little more scientific basis but behind what we do. And then we need to constantly reinforce to the C-suite, to the infection preventionist, to everybody that's in the hospital system that, hey, sterile processing is not an entry level job anymore. Maybe it was
Yeah.
50 years ago, but the way that things have evolved, the technology has evolved, all the knowledge that a person has to have to work in SPD, it's just so difficult to retain all that kind of information. There has to be some kind of form of formal schooling eventually, and especially for leadership, I really think there should be some type of AA degree for a sterile processing leader,
Yeah.
to understand water quality, to understand the chemistries that we use, all of those kinds of scientific concepts. So I think that's the place where we start. We start with the job description. We move to the C-suite and the people that are making those decisions, and reinforce why this idea is so important.
Yeah, that's interesting. I really like that. And it kind of reminded me of something that we had pre-existing in our health system that I learned about as a manager of SPD that I didn't know about initially. And maybe this is kind of a gateway. So like, maybe someone hears this conversation like, oh, maybe that's a really good idea. Maybe we could try and implement that. Well, maybe there's a way to sort of have some steps to do that. And there was a job description and title in our health system where it was sterile processing assistant, and they were responsible for obviously learning all of the sterile processing related things, but really they were kind of, their focus was more on like picking case carts, stocking shelves. I think they did some decontam work as well, but they were never responsible for running the sterilizer and doing the sterilizer loads and certain other critical aspects of the job. Obviously, you can make an argument that they're all critical, but what I'm trying to say is that maybe there's some flexibility for some creativity to come into play where you actually build an entry level position that gets somebody there, but to get to the full full surgical or sterile processing technologist role, maybe, you have to complete the certification, or you have to complete all of the certification, whatever you end up deciding you need to do in your facility. And perhaps that ends up upgrading the pay and upgrading all that stuff as well. But yeah, any final thoughts, Adam, before we wrap up? I think this is a great sort of food for thought conversation, and I hope our listeners kind of chime in on this one too.
Yeah, and that would be my takeaway too, is really a call to action. Because if we take our industry seriously, and I know a lot of us, and if you're listening to a sterile processing podcast, you're one of those, right? You're somebody who takes it seriously.
That's
So
right.
I think it's a call to action to like, hey, let's change what the mindset is around what we do. Because if we don't do it, I don't think anybody else is going to take that, take the ball and run with it on this. IP, I know understands how important it is what we do, but I don't think they're going to like advocate for us with the C-suite. We have to do it. And it's got to be a call to action for people that are listening to say, let's rethink what this job title is, and maybe try to form like a task force or something to really start pushing this forward and getting it to the right people, getting it into the ears of the right people that can make those changes at big levels. So that'd be what I would say. Just if there's anything you ever want to do, reach out to us here at the podcast. Or all of it. We have hmark.com emails. You can check us out there. But that's what I want that takeaway to be, is let's try to do something about this.
Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate it, Adam. And I'm glad that you brought this topic up. It's one that I've thought about a lot. And obviously from, an education standpoint, we talked about the associate degree thing a little bit, and talked about it online and whatnot. But I'm curious, what the listeners think. Is this kind of an offensive idea, or do you kind of get excited about it? Do you have kind of ideas now swirling around in your head? I'd love to hear about it. If it inspires you to, make a change, we would love to hear what your thoughts are. So if you're listening to this and are interested, well, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at asktheeducator@hmark.com. And we would look forward to any comments or questions or thoughts that you might have. We appreciate what you do very much. And both of us have worked in the trenches, so we get it. But thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you. All opinions expressed on this episode are those of the presenters. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
For using any medical device, it's important to review the manufacturer's instructions for use and consult with a professional.
For any questions or feedback, please reach out to us at asktheeducator@hmark.com.